Is conflict inevitable? Well, yes, it is, but no, it isn't. Yes, it is, because if we want to make progress in our lives, we are going to come up against other people. They are the gatekeepers. So there's no way we can avoid other people. And often a lot of people that are ineffective avoid conflict. And it's often sold as a good thing. Oh, I don't like conflict. And it's sold as a good thing. But actually, it can be a very disabling thing, not liking conflict and avoiding conflict. So yes, conflict is inevitable. You need to accept that there will be some conflict. But no, conflict isn't inevitable, because it can put us in the wrong frame of mind, in that we always think of conflict as sort of win-lose, as a zero-sum game. I win, therefore you lose. And we can look at it very differently. We can look at it as a win-win. But also, if we look at conflict and how conflict is portrayed and how people deal with conflict, even in the modern world, it becomes incredibly disabling. For instance, if you look, a very popular person when it comes to looking at how to win conflict is Machiavelli. Everybody reads The Prince and thinks that that's how conflict works, and that's how we can manipulate people. Also, Sun Tzu and The Art of War is another very popular one. There's even modern writers such as Robert Greene, who wrote the 48 Laws of Power. But they all make the same mistake, and that's that you have to vanquish your enemy. You basically have to kill your opponent. Now, in the modern world, you can't kill your opponent. So your opponent therefore hangs around. So you may beat them, but they'll just hang around and plot their revenge. So they're completely ineffective for the modern world. You cannot vanquish your enemy. You therefore have to develop a better strategy. And that better strategy is that you either persuade the people you're trying to persuade that may be in a conflictual situation, or you try and influence them. Now, they're very different things. So how do you persuade somebody? Well, we talked about win-win. That's the answer to persuasion. You develop a win-win in that you help your victory by creating a victory for them. So you work out what they want and you find a way of delivering what they want. Now, that has to be obviously part of what you want as well, but what you're trying to do is create a win-win situation in which it's not a win-lose. There's no conflict there because you've given them something that they want. So persuasion is about giving them something they want. Now, they might not have realized that they wanted it, and that's your role as persuading them that that's what they want, that win is their win. It's not your win, it's their win. Well, what's the difference with influence? Well, notice what's happened with persuasion, in that you have something and you've persuaded them that they want it. Fine, but they might not really have wanted it. With influence, you first of all work out what they want and you make that your goal, to deliver what they want. You're not trying to persuade anyone of anything. You're trying to understand what they want. So it's not head and head, it's actually side by side. You're alongside this person. So clearly you have to work out who you want to influence. If their objectives aren't the same as yours, then you're trying to influence the wrong people. You need to find out who you need to influence. Who are your fellow travelers? Who can you stand alongside to help you achieve your objectives? And you need to influence them. And the way you influence them is by making sure that your focus is on achieving their goals. That's how you influence somebody. If some conflict is inevitable, what then? Well, we need to avoid making mistakes when it comes to conflict. And we all tend to make the same mistakes when it comes to conflict. First of all, we tend to react emotionally. We tend to run it down an emotional route. Every time there's a conflict, it's emotional. Of course it's emotional, but we tend to run it down an emotional route, and we evaluate it emotionally, and we seek emotional answers and responses. So we need to try and remove the emotion from the conflict. What are the practical things that we need to achieve from this conflict? Focus on them. Try and remove the emotions that get in the way of a solution when it comes to conflict. One way of avoiding becoming emotional is to focus on the impact on them. What tends to happen when we're in a conflict situation, we're always focused on the impact on us. And that's very disabling. Not only is it disabling because it makes us more emotional, it actually hands them all the power. They have the power because the only thing that matters to you is the impact on you. Why not make it about the impact on them? So notice the impact you're having on them. Therefore, you have the power, and it becomes much more enabling. Suddenly, you're able to focus on what you need to focus on, which is on persuading them to do what you want them to do, because you're focused on the impact on them, not on the impact on yourself. That's a very, very enabling conversion of thinking. Two other elements to this. One is not focusing on the detail. Again, that emotional red mist that occurs when it comes to conflict mean that people don't focus on the details. Now, actually, the details could be the very thing that help you win by drilling down into what really is happening here, but they could also be the very thing that mean you lose because you've not focused on the details. Someone else has got the detail and they've thrown it in your face. So make sure the detail is there, the detail is apparent to you, and the detail is focused upon, because that's the way in which you'll persuade somebody, by being very on top of the details. And so often we become emotional partly because we're not on top of the detail. Perhaps we're trying to hide the fact that we're not on top of the detail. So get on top of the detail. Secondly is prejudice. Don't prejudge people. If you go into a meeting or to a conflict situation with a prejudice, all that will happen is you'll have your prejudice confirmed. You'll look for the confirmation and you'll find the confirmation. So remove the prejudice from any situation. If you assume somebody is being nasty to you, you have a prejudice that they're being nasty to you, you'll find it. You'll find that prejudice. So physically really try and remove that prejudice from your thinking when you go into a conflict situation. Not always easy, but sometimes life isn't easy. You need to just sort of step back a bit. That classic situation of perhaps going to the loo and sort of just looking in the mirror and collecting your thoughts. That's what you collect in the thoughts. You try and remove the prejudice, try and remove the emotion, try and work out what your objective is, try and work out what the details are you need to remember. How can we avoid the conflict between our work life and our home life? It always seems that there's an inevitable conflict there. There's an inevitable balance to be struck. And how can we do that? How can we strike that balance? Well, I think first of all, we need to realize that home and work can be allies. It can work for each other. Another thing we need to accept is that men and women in this case have very different concerns and it ends up with very different priorities. They might not begin with different priorities, but they end up with different priorities. What can happen with men is that they can sacrifice their family life in order to accelerate their careers. What can happen with women is that they can sacrifice their careers in order to fulfill their family obligations. Now, that's obviously a generalization and it's not universally true, but that tends to be what happens. But in fact, what we should think is that the opposite can happen, is that what can happen with men, for instance, is that having a good family life can actually support their careers. It can make them feel more confident at work, and it can help them achieve their work objectives by having a strong family support. And also for women, it can actually help to have a strong career and to have strong career objectives that can help motivate her, and actually they can help support her family life, because she doesn't feel isolated by her family life. She doesn't feel demeaned by her family life. That she feels supported by the roundness that she has in terms of both her career and her family life. So what changes can be made to support that sort of work-family balance? Well, one of the key things to notice is that it's not always time that's the issue. It always feels like it's time that's the issue, but it's not always the issue. Often what the issue is what my wife calls headspace with me. She often says, I'm there, but I'm not there, because my head's full of stuff. And so while I'm with my family, I'm still mentally at work. Now, I think that is the crucial mistake that people, including me, make, and it's that we have to get over. When we're at work, have a laser-like focus on work. Do not be distracted. But the minute we're out of work, have a laser-like focus on the family, and do not be distracted. If things happen, if things pop into your head, keep a notebook with you. Write them down, because once you've written them down, you can then forget about them. Get back to the family, because obviously ideas do pop into your head. I always have a notebook, write it down. I can then completely focus on my family. So it's headspace that matters. Make sure you have the correct headspace for your family. You're not distracted. One of the things to do that is to actually develop family projects. Actually have ideas that you want to develop with your family, things you want to teach them, hobbies you want to start. So a program for your family life. So don't just waste the time with family time, watching TV together or something. Have objectives, so that just as your work life has objectives, your family life has objectives as well. So that becomes key, crucial time. That's not time wasted, it's time developed.